Okay, well, thanks for joining this webinar. My name is Rob Downey. I'm with Off Campus Partners, which is a part of the Apartments.com family in the CoStar Group. And we are fortunate enough to partner with many universities across the country, working really as a partnership to create and maintain an off-campus housing website really geared to help students to find, locate, that housing that's going to fit their needs, potentially find a roommate, and also just learn about various resources within the community. And in the college. So this is a introductory webinar meant to give you a couple of ideas of what to think about when looking for housing. Some basic terminology, some easy expectations maybe of landlords and lessees. But also, of course, it's a demo of our off-campus marketplace website that's going to help you look for and find those opportunities for a living, as well as to take advantage of the resources that we have available. So we're going to go through, again, just kind of where to start. What are some questions to ask and to think about? How do you start that search? What are, once again, some terminology, some best practices, really. And then we'll get into the actual demo of the site where we'll go through the various resources. We'll go through the roommate section, as well as actually locating and using our search function to find that housing that's going to suit your needs. Now, rather than just do a demo of a site, I really do like going over some, terminology and some best practices first. I think that is really good to get a sense of, some best practices and just an understanding of, what to expect when you are, going, into the housing search. Many of you may have been renting houses already, but this also may be new to some others. And so I think it's important to kind of set it up real quick. So just a few points of terminology that I think is important to understand, not overly complicated, but it's definitely good to know what you're reading in terms of leases or how properties are describing themselves on the site. And really, like, the first one I would highlight is just a joint lease versus individual. And yes, an individual lease is for one person, a joint lease is for multiple. But I think the key point here to really remember is that in a joint lease, all of the tenants are responsible for all of the rent. So whatever happens, maybe one of the tenants, got sick and has to go home and can't pay, has left the university, whatever that situation is, in a joint lease, the remainder of the tenants in that house or condo or unit is going to be responsible for the rent. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. The lease term, this is definitely important to pay attention to. Are you looking at a 12-month lease, a 9-month lease, a month-to-month lease? This is important because I think several times you may be looking maybe just for one school semester or term. You do have the option to sublet your units on our website as well. So just paying attention to what that term is advertised will definitely help you in your search. Leases themselves, they're legally binding contracts. So I can't stress this enough. Read the lease and make sure you have that understanding of what's included. And really, it's just about communication as well. Anything that is kind of up for confusion between you and a landlord, it's best to either put that in writing or to talk and communicate and get that understanding and understanding what's in your lease. Avoiding scams. We're going to pull up some resources for you to be aware of this. Now, as a company, we do a lot behind the scenes to locate spams and remove those from the site. But in the event that there are one of these listings on here, and it's important for you to understand some main things to look out for. What are some things that might not look quite right? Basically, if it's too good to be true, than it may be. So we'll go through some resources just to help educate you to avoid those scams, not only for properties, but for roommates as well. And then also just renters insurance. Some properties may require that you have a policy, some do not. Definitely take account and stock of, what you're going to be bringing into a unit and think about if that's something that you would like to insure. So again, just a couple of terminology right here. Also like to go over just what are some reasonable expectations of a landlord. So a couple that I would highlight are ensuring that they have a copy of the lease and that you have a copy and that you read it thoroughly before signing. I kind of can't stress that enough. A landlord is required to properly maintain the unit and complete repairs in timely manner. And also it's about communication and notification. Do they need to enter the unit for any repairs or for anything? They should be giving you enough notice beforehand, as well as any changes in rent. That's also important to communicate. A landlord is also expected to pay for regular and routine maintenance, and so that's important as well. Some unreasonable expectations is to help and assist you with any financial hardships. We're all human beings, and we definitely want to help each other out, but this is a situation where it's important to understand the lease and the terms that are given. And also it's unreasonable for a landlord to evict you without proper notice or with any violation of the lease. And so notification and just communication in general needs to take place before anything happens with landlord and tenant. Now, there are some other items in here as well. We're going to have this resource available to you on the resource page or in other avenues, but these are definitely things just to keep in mind and to think about as you're starting your housing search. Some tenant responsibilities. Upkeep of the unit. You're expected to keep the place clean and tidy, remove the trash and any of the dirt buildup that's in the unit. Limiting damages, definitely, put up your favorite pictures on the wall, put up a poster, decorate, but be mindful of for the property itself and the damages that are included in putting things up on the wall or really anything like that. Really, it's about taking care of the place like it's your own. And then also reporting any issues. Any repairs needed or any maintenance items, communicate that with the landlord right away, because you don't want those issues to kind of grow and exasperate themselves. And so again, really communication with your landlord is going to be very important. So a couple of kind of steps to think about when you're looking at starting your housing search. And we're going to touch on a couple of these in a little bit more detail with some resources that are available. But number one is just look at your budget. Think about what kind of expenses would be incurred when renting, rent, utilities, food. And also it's important to understand what other costs are included with a particular unit. And you'll see on the website that we do have that transparency as to what other cost may be needed, on part of the tenant. So understanding what your budget is, what the cost might be associated with renting, and really just thinking about what it is that you need and are really looking for is going to help you with your initial housing search. So you've narrowed your search down. So phase number 2 is really just to start comparing the details. What different amenities are included? What is there a dishwasher? Is there parking? And really make a grid, make a spreadsheet, and really keep track of that. Then also just some, other kind of policies that might be important to understand: the pet policy, the guest policy, what utilities are included, not uh, included, things like that. How do you pay rent? Is it check, Venmo, any other, type of methods? So just a lot of questions, just a full understanding of really what you're getting yourself into, I believe is really important. So that was it. Just again, a couple of expectations, a couple of best practices, and kind of direction when you're looking at starting your housing search. Now we'll get into the site in just a moment, but I just want to preview it in these slides. So this is the main view of the site, and you see here that there's a housing search, there's the roommate section, there's this resource section, and also as a student you can actually list a sublet as well. And so you're allowed to list those units if you have to move away for whatever reason. So this is an example of the housing search page. You see that map with your campus highlighted with all the available units shown around the campus. And there's going to be lots of options to really get granular on the data that's being shown. Distance to campus, points of interest, types of public transportation that's available. A lot of things that can really help you kind of narrow down your search. And then with the roommate, you can create a profile. You can kind of specify what you're looking for, gender, the cleanliness, timeliness, smoking, pets, a lot of different options that you can really specify who it is you're really looking to share a unit with. So let me go ahead and get out of my presentation, and I'm going to pull up the website, as you will see right here. And the website itself is easy to navigate to. It's really offcampus.xavier.edu. So because we partner with the university, we're able to utilize the branding and the EDU website, as this really is an internal resource for you to use. We're just helping maintain it. So this is the site. And the first thing that I would highlight, and this can be found in the resource section, but we talked about scams a little bit. So I just want to pull up this avoid scams and fraud document. And there are a lot of great questions to ask to be aware of, and also some other items just to look out for. As you can kind of see a little bit high level of what we do to avoid scams, but we also have some items just to look out. Here are some common red flags that I think is important to read over and just to, to understand. Things like, is the rent way below market value? Once again, is it too good to be true? It might be. So rent offered at below market, any kind of unique requests for how to obtain the rent. Usually you're going to be wiring money. A dramatic landlord story. I mean, it's really about anything that you could think of. Is the landlord wanting you to move in as soon as possible? Do they want the first month rent immediately? It's just some things that might cause you uneasiness. Just look out for these red flags. It doesn't always mean it is a scam, but if it's a potential scam, it's worth looking more into, or even discussing with your housing office, or even the resources that we have at off-campus partners as well. And there's some information here about how to report scams, as I just mentioned. And then we also have some examples, and I think these are really helpful to look over. So I would encourage you to look over these examples as to what might look like a scam. Now, we also have some information about how are you finding a roommate, and what are some things to look out for. This is absolutely critical to be comfortable with the people that you're going to be living with. So there's just some best practices here of what to post, what not to post. what do you include when you're emailing a potential roommates or even meeting in person? So there's a lot of best practices that I think is worthy for you to really take a look at, make sure that you protect yourself and your colleagues and peers as well. So this is a great resource. And really, this doesn't go only to, looking for housing. I think you can really utilize these best practices across many avenues in life. So let me go back to the main page. Oh, yes, Eric, I believe you have a
Rob,
question.
are you on the page now? Because what I'm seeing just says site demo and there's a QR code. Should I be seeing
Oh,
the
I
actual
should be
website or?
sharing my screen. Thank you very much.
Um,
Let me try that one more time again. I appreciate it. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. So let me just real quick, let me just go back and just highlight, not going to go back through it, but you see here this avoid scams and fraud section found within the resources and a lot of good content here just to make sure you read over and to get a sense of when you're looking for housing as well as roommates. Erica, thank you for that. So back to the main site, let's actually go into this resource section. I'm going to open this up. And it's divided into 4 categories. And I'm just going to highlight a couple that I think are really worthwhile. They all are. But to start with, I'm going to go to starting your search. And a couple things I would highlight. One is this student budget. This is a great worksheet that really goes through the various line items of potential expenses. And so start to fill this out, or it's also things just to ask potential landlords to get the full picture of what it's going to cost. There's also this housing search checklist as well. So kind of like with the budget, this also goes through some questions to ask, some timelines, things like that. Another thing that is not mandatory, but I do think it's a best practice, and I think it's probably helpful from any future misunderstandings, is a sample roommate agreement. Things like you agree on, paying certain fees or upfront cost or responsibilities. I think it's a best practice just to get that understanding with the individuals that you're going to be sharing a space with. So these 3 resources, along with these other links, I think are really valuable just to help set you up for success in a successful housing search as well as roommate search as well. So I'm going to go now to the Living Off Campus link. And a lot of great, more localized information here. A lot of information about safety, being a good neighbor and connecting with your community. I think when we're thinking about student housing, I think there's a bridge between the universities and the communities. And I think, being that good steward and representative, of Xavier is very important to all that's involved. And so I think it is important to, look at this and just, understand what part, you can play in really helping to have that relationship thrive. So I think this is important. And there's some other really good, useful links about utilities and, other various information in here as well. And then the last thing I'll point out is the Xavier resources. So again, a lot of helpful links to some internal information for Xavier, some more safety, the student handbooks, student affairs, Xavier Police, the Office of Graduate School. So just lots of good resources that we all kind of link here as a hub of resources. And so this is all can be really really kind of tying into your housing search. And so definitely don't come out here only looking for housing because you will be missing out on some really great resources that are here. All right, so I'll touch on next the roommate finder. And again, like I could just click on this link up here. I've already opened it in my screen. Actually, my box is kind of hiding it. So I'm just going to click on the roommate finder here. And you can see there's a couple of options already But if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see that there's a lot of ways that you can filter and really search the results. Things about the gender identity, when they're going to be needing a roommate, are they looking for a place or they already have a place? Maybe um, habits around smoking or vaping, any pets, the cleanliness, the university, are you undergraduate? Are you a graduate? Just a lot of good information to help you understand, who a potential roommate is. And just to show you, if I could edit profile, and I am impersonating one of our great contacts at Xavier, but just to show you, this is the opportunity. You could talk about your age, your gender, your hometown. You have the opportunity to describe yourself, what you like, what you're looking for, and things like that. So, being honest and, truthful here, I think can only help just to find that right match that you're really comfortable with. All right, let me go back to the housing site now. This is the bread and butter here of our off-campus site. So here on the right-hand side are going to be all of the listings that we have. And as you scroll through them, there's going to be more and more, but using the criteria and the filters or even the map can really help you kind of hone in on those properties that you're looking for. So on the map itself here, there's a couple of things that we can do. I could use this draw tool and actually draw an area that I may be interested in looking at. So maybe I can click on draw and I can just kind of draw a little shape, as you can see here. And so now my results will show those particular units. Now we could also go to the campus or neighborhood. So if there's a certain neighborhood that you may be interested in, you can actually select those and look in those areas. So these are all popular neighborhoods within the area. Under map tools, you can also pull in items such as on-campus points of interest. So are you going to be spending all your time, at the student center or maybe hopefully the library or, the lab school, any other, schools or buildings. It's, we want to get granular to really show you exactly where it is you're going to be spending your time in relation to the housing that you're looking for. And then also under map tools, I can look at area points of interest. Where are some of the grocery stores, the coffee shops, where are the banks located? Maybe the gyms, things like that. So that's the map. And then using these filters up on top, you can really get granular with your search. So you could specify a price range, the pricing type, and this is actually important to know. Are you looking at per bedroom or per unit? And a per unit may have multiple bedrooms, and so it's important to understand what's being listed as the price, and so you can know what the actual rent is going to be, whether that's unit or per bedroom. Bids and baths. You could specify the building type. Are you only looking, for an apartment? Does a townhome, work okay? Things like that. And then we get into this more category with a lot of good content. So I want to open that up and highlight a couple. So one that I would point out specifically is in this top section, a property with move-in specials. And so this is something we just added to the site. So many properties are going to be advertising specials to, obviously entice students to live in their units. So I can select property with move-in specials. Now, you might not be needing to move in right away. Maybe you're looking at, down the line. Maybe you're looking at the fall or maybe even next spring. Well, you could actually select that range that you will be needing to move. So either it's a range, or I could just say, listen, I know I'm going to be needing a house in September coming up. So I can actually go ahead and select September as my future a desired move in. And there's lots of other good information in here as well. Number of occupants, maybe the distance to campus. So maybe I can do that for 2 miles. And then you could click on done, and you can view your units. So let's just take one of these as an example. We'll just take this house right here. And if I scroll down here, not only will you have all of the pictures of this unit, but then you'll see this rent special. So sign in by 5:30. Well, this one's a little old. We might need to update that one. I'm guessing this is meant to say 2025, but this one has a gift card that's available. And so you can see the bedrooms that are available. And what's this convenient for? You have this nice write-up, the lease terms. And so for this unit, they would be accepting either a 12-month lease or a 9-month lease. So that's important to understand what the limitations are there. Then also the expenses. So we see here that there's a security deposit, and that these are the included utilities. We do have the contact information, list of amenities, and then we've got our map again. So here we see this unit. So kind of like what we did in the other screen, I can use my drop downs, and I can pick out one of these points of interest. So maybe the College of Business. So now I see to the College of Business, this is a 3-minute car ride, 11-minute walk. Maybe I can look at the public transportation. It looks like I got the 51 a bus that it goes right by the property. So it's just really important to understand the the commute that you're going to be having. And then you can also overlay these other points of interest, like restaurants and grocery stores, coffee shops, banks, things like that. Pet policy, security, parking, as well as some other local and nearby attractions like colleges, universities, shopping centers, parks and recreation, and things like that. Then also these ratings, bikeable, walkable, how noisy is the area. So lots of information to go through, which is why it's so important just to have that understanding of what it is you're really looking for, because there's a lot of information here. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, looking for housing. There's a lot of information in here, not only per each listing, but also, as you saw, there's a lot of great resources at your fingertips as well. And I would certainly encourage you to take advantage of, all of these resources right here. Now, it looks like there are some questions in the chat. So let me open that up and go through a few. And if you two have, or if anybody has any additional questions, just put them into the chat. So how much rent can I afford? Well, I think using the budget worksheet is a great place to start. Really going through the worksheet, going through those line items, understanding, what you have coming in, going out is really important. So I think utilizing that would be a good place to start. How can I be a good roommate? I think at the end of it, it's about communication. I've said that many times already. And so being honest about what you're looking for, who you are, and being able to communicate that and being honest with the prospective roommates, I think is a great place to really act like a good and respectable roommate. I think without communication, then I think issues arise. And so having a clear, understanding, maybe utilizing that roommate agreement that can really kind of set the tone for, a good partnership is always a good place to start. Those are good questions. What resources and mechanisms by which current freshmen and soon-to-be sophomores may request exemption for the 2-year on-campus housing policy to pursue off-campus housing as an alternative? So that's a great question. That would be a question I would likely direct to your internal housing departments at the Xavier to really go through, those requirements. But I will say that, even if you do have the live on requirement, that you do, I do think it's important to get on here and to start looking and being aware of what's available. A lot of times you need to start your search, well in advance. And so, just having that awareness of, what neighborhoods are good, where are your friends at? What are the locations that you think would be the best for you? Just having that knowledge in your head, so when you are ready, your search will be that much easier. I think it's a good place to start. And then when you report an issue, is there a time frame you should expect the issues to be addressed? That's a great question. So if you do contact our support information, which actually I should show you. So on the website, there's this help section right on the left-hand side. And so this is where not only you could go into the students, faculty, and staff, and you can find there's frequently asked questions, there's account settings, but also this customer support. So we have a customer support team that can help address any issues that come up. And usually our support team will be in communication with the universities and also the properties in certain circumstances as well. And so we take a very proactive approach into really addressing any concerns. And we would maintain that we would certainly like to respond at least within 24 hours. That's a good question. If there are no other questions, then I will conclude this, this brief webinar, but I hope this has been helpful. Oh, yes, I believe there is another question, Erica.
Yes, I was going to bring your attention to that question that was just submitted.
Yes. All right, there is another one here. All right, so since there's a partnership with Xavier University, does the website housing program only show properties that are owned, managed, leased by people who have previously leased to Xavier students, or people who have multiple properties that they lease rent? It's a wide array of individuals, property management companies, and whatnot that would like to advertise and really target the student population. A part of our company being a part of apartments.com, it means that we have local sales people in every market that they know the communities. They actually go out and they talk to the property owners, every year, every month. And so having that local knowledge and those relationships really drive the listings that we have on the site. So it's really a mix of everybody that wants to market and to advertise and offer those available units to students, the faculty, the grad students, the staff. And so it's a little bit of everything. That's a good question. Are there any other questions? And certainly, if there are other questions that arise, you can reach out to your local housing office or our partners. You could reach out to us through that support page. We're here to help and support. So please reach out. Don't hesitate. We value the user experience, the student experience, and we really want you to be successful in your housing search, your roommate search, and really just being comfortable. So please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, well, I don't think there's any more questions at the time. Again, really appreciate it. This has been recorded, and so this will be a resource moving forward. We will maybe do this again. So please, bring your questions, and we're more than happy to address them. And I hope everybody has a great evening. And thank you very much. Bye now.